Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am Mr. Hussain, MEL Specialist at Premier Mountain Communities Consultants, or PMCC Gilgit-Baltistan. Welcome to another learning session where we discuss important concepts related to monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning. Today, we're diving straight into a really crucial topic, choosing the right evaluation design. Whether you're a development practitioner, a project manager, or just someone fascinated by how we actually prove what works in the real world, this session is for you. We're going to walk down what I call the methodological waterfall, moving from theoretical ideals all the way down to the complex, everyday realities of field data. We've got a great agenda lined up for today. We'll kick things off with some core evaluation concepts, explore the gold standard of experimental design, and then step down into quasi and non-experimental methods. After that, we'll review a handy decision matrix, and finally, put your knowledge to the test with a real-world applied scenario. All right, let's jump right in. Section 1, Introduction to Evaluation Concepts, Measuring and Attributing Impact. To get us started, we really need to establish what we mean when we talk about project evaluation in the development sector. Now, notice the absolutely crucial word here, attributes. You see, evaluation isn't just about spotting a change. It's not enough to just look around and say, hey, poverty went down while we ran our program. That's monitoring. Evaluation is about proving your specific project actually caused that change. You must confidently show that the measured effect is directly linked to your intervention. Because of that, every robust evaluation basically has to answer two fundamental questions. First, is there a change? And second, can this change be attributed to the program? Now, to answer that second question, we have to find what statisticians call a counterfactual. Basically, we need to know what would have happened to these exact same people if your project had never existed. So, how do we find this counterfactual? Well, we look at non-participants. But pay close attention to the terminology we use here, because it matters. We call them a control group in randomized experiments, but we call them a comparison group when randomization just isn't possible. Honestly, the entire architecture of evaluation design is just about how accurately we can construct this group of non-participants to mimic the people who actually received the treatment. Which brings us to Section 2, the experimental design standard, the methodological ideal. Let's see how this builds the absolute highest standard of evidence. You've probably heard of them, experimental designs, specifically randomized control trials, or RCTs. They really are the gold standard. Why? Well, imagine you take a pool of eligible people and just randomly divide them into two groups. One gets the treatment, the other becomes the control. Because it's completely random, those two groups are statistically identical. That random assignment process serves as a perfect counterfactual. It completely wipes out selection bias. You know, the problem where only the most motivated people sign up for your program, totally skewing your results. But here's the catch. As powerful as RCTs are on paper, they face massive hurdles in the messy reality of fieldwork. Sometimes, withholding benefits from a control group is flat out unethical. Or it might be politically disastrous to exclude a specific district from a new health initiative. Plus, RCTs are huge, expensive undertakings. You have to plan the evaluation before the project even starts. And let's not forget contamination. People in the real world move around, they talk, they share resources. That kind of real-world interaction can easily ruin a pure experiment. So what do? That leads us to Section 3, Quasi-Experimental Evaluation Designs, the pragmatic middle. This is what happens when you simply cannot randomize. Let's say the intervention area is already pre-decided by policymakers. In a quasi-experimental design, the allocation to the treatment and comparison groups isn't random. Instead, statisticians step in and mathematically construct an artificial comparison group. These methodologies are absolute lifesavers in the development sector. They allow us to evaluate impact using pre-decided project areas, or even by digging into historical data long after a project has launched. One of the most popular methods here is called difference in differences, or DID. Think about tracking two groups over time, one that gets the intervention and one that doesn't. By measuring data at a baseline before the project and an end line after, we can essentially filter out the natural growth or decline that would have happened anyway. We just subtract the normal trend, and whatever difference is left over, that is the true impact attributed to our project. But wait, what if you don't even have baseline data? In that case, you might use propensity score matching. This is kind of like a statistical magic trick. First, you identify variables that affect participation, like someone's income or education level. Then, you calculate a probability score from 0 to 1 for each person. Finally, you build your artificial comparison group by matching project participants with non-participants who have nearly identical propensity scores. You're statistically pairing them up to fake a randomized control group. Pretty brilliant, right? Okay, another powerful quasi-experimental method is regression discontinuity. This is absolutely perfect for when eligibility is based on a strict cutoff. Imagine a food subsidy program where a family only qualifies if their poverty score is exactly 40 or below. We don't need to survey the entire population here. We just zoom right in and analyze the people immediately on either side of that cutoff line. Think about it. A household that scores a 39.9 and a household that scores a 40.1 are practically identical in every single way in real life. The only difference is that one got the intervention and the other didn't. So if we look at the outcomes for those specific groups, any sudden jump or gap right at that cutoff line perfectly isolates the project's impact. It's elegant and it gives us really high validity right at that boundary. Now, what about voluntary programs with universal coverage? Here, we have a major problem. Highly motivated people will self-select into the program. You obviously can't just compare them to unmotivated non-participants. So, we use an instrumental variable. For example, let's say you randomly promote the program really heavily in certain areas. This random promotion acts as your instrument. It organically boosts enrollment without forcing anyone's assignment. This creates a mathematically valid comparison group that actually controls for that tricky, hidden bias of human motivation. But sometimes, you're faced with a complex, nationwide policy change with full coverage. There is absolutely no way to create a comparison group. That brings us to Section 4, Non-Experimental Evaluation Designs, Complex Realities. For completely non-experimental data, where we are just tracking the exact same group over a long period, we have to lean on some pretty heavy statistical models. A fixed effect model, for instance, explores relationships within an entity by removing variables that don't change over time. Alternatively, a random effect model assumes variation is random and uncorrelated. Now, without a conventional counterfactual, these are definitely less robust, but sometimes, in the real world, they are literally the only option you have to pull insights from a massive universal program. Section 5, Comparing Evaluation Methodologies, Your Decision Matrix. I know we've covered a ton of theory today, so let's pull it all together into a practical cheat sheet for your next project. Consider this table your ultimate survival guide for impact measurement. The main takeaways? Use RCTs whenever you have the budget and can plan ahead. Rely on regression discontinuity when you have strict point-based criteria. Go with difference and differences when you have solid baseline data. Fall back to matching when you only have end-line data to work with. And reserve non-experimental designs for when complex, nationwide realities force your hand. Let's make this real. Section 6, Applied Scenario, Bidi Padao Yojana. We're going to apply that exact matrix right now. Imagine you're the meal specialist tasked with evaluating a massive corporate social responsibility project. The goal? Raise girls' primary school attendance from a dismal 36%. The intervention is comprehensive, building toilets, providing midday meals, giving out hygiene kits. But here is your real-world constraint. There are 450 eligible villages targeted, but your budget only allows you to cover 200 of them. So here's my challenge to you. Imagine this 5-year project is wrapping up. Your budget for field data is totally exhausted, but you discover the state ministry has actually been quietly collecting annual district-level school attendance data this entire time. Look back at your options. Given those specific constraints, how would you construct your counterfactual to prove to your stakeholders that your project actually worked? Think about it and let me know what you choose. Thank you for watching this learning session. If you found this video useful, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more professional learning videos on monitoring, evaluation, project management, and organizational development. Huda Hafiz.